Today in class we talked about monohybrid crosses and using Punnett squares with our dominant and recessive alleles for complete dominance. We had homework on pages 13 and 14 in the packet, numbers 17 through 20. As we look at those questions, they're referring to tall or short things, dominant, recessive, genotype, phenotype, so you need to become familiar with these terms, and this video should help you with some of those terms. So this gives us tall is dominant to short, and two heterozygous tall plants are crossed to produce offspring. So when we talk about the terms dominant and recessive, dominant alleles are represented by capital letters. So you need to pick a letter, and in this case, I'm just going to pick the letter T, and I'll use a capital T to represent the dominant allele and a lowercase t to represent the recessive allele of short. Now that I've chosen letters, I'm going to determine what the genotypes of my parents would be. The genotype tells me what particular alleles of the gene I have. So this says that they are heterozygous. Hetero means different, which means they have one of the tall and one of the short, or one of the dominant and one of the recessive allele. So here we have both parents, and they are each heterozygous, which means they have one dominant and one recessive allele. So I have capital T lowercase t and capital T lowercase t for each of the parents. The next step would be to draw the Punnett square and put the letters for each parent on the top or side of that Punnett square. It does not matter which parent goes on the top or the side, as long as one parent is on the top and the other is on the side. Once I have my Punnett square showing one parent on the top here and the other parent on the side here, the next step would be to pull the letters down into the boxes from the top and pull the letters from the right, or from the left, sorry, to the right into the boxes from the left-hand side. So the capital T will be pulled into both of these boxes here. The same thing will happen with the lowercase t. It will be pulled in both of these boxes, and it will be placed on the second half of the box because we like the capital letter to be. The next step is to bring the letters into the boxes from the left-hand side. So we'll bring the capital T in from the left, and then next we'll bring the lowercase t in from the left. So here you see the letters have been brought in from the left-hand side. Now it's time to determine the genotype and phenotype of our offspring. So when we look at genotype, we're looking at which alleles are present, the dominant or recessive alleles, or a mixture of both. So as we look through the Punnett square, I see a capital capital, capital lowercase, and lowercase lowercase. So I have all three combinations available in my genotype. Next, I want to consider my phenotype. The phenotype is what you see. So the options here, it tells me tall and short are what these plants could look like. Now we need to determine the ratios of how many are capital T, lowercase t, lowercase t. As we look at these, you can show them as fractions or you can show them as percents. So as I look at my Punnett square, I see that I have one here that is capital T. So that's one out of a total of 4 is capital T. And 1 out of 4 is 25%. Next we'll do capital T lowercase t. This is heterozygous. It has one of each. I see one here that's capital T lowercase t and one here that's capital T lowercase t. So that's 2 out of the 4 total, and 2/4 reduces to 1/2. So that's 50% of the offspring. Last but not least, we want to do the lowercase t. So that is homozygous recessive because it's both lowercase letters. I see one offspring that is lowercase t, so that's 1 out of the total of 4, which is 1/4, or 25%. Now that we've finished with the genotypes, we can look at the phenotypes. The two phenotype options are tall and short. So as I look at the phenotypes, since tall is dominant to short, it tells us that in the question. That means any offspring that have a capital letter, a dominant letter, will be tall. So I see one offspring here that has a capital letter. It actually has both capital letters. It's homozygous dominant. I see an offspring here that has a capital letter. It has a capital and a lowercase. An offspring here that has a capital letter. It has a capital and lowercase. It's heterozygous. And this one doesn't, so we're not going to count that one. So I've got 3 of the offspring, 3 out of 4, that have the capital letter, meaning those 3 will be tall, and 3 out of 4 is 75%. Last, we'll look at the short offspring. Short is the recessive gene. Recessive genes are represented by small or lowercase letters, and we only have one offspring that has both lowercase letters, so that means 1 out of 4 total offspring will be short, and 1 out of 4 is 25%. Now that you found the possible genotype and phenotype ratios, a quick way to check is to look at your percentages and make sure they add up to 100. So in the genotypes, 25, 50, and 25 will add up to 100. And then in the phenotype, 75 and 25 will also add up to 100. Last thing we want to look at is see what this question is asking us in particular. And it does say, what are the chances the offspring will be tall? So we're really only concerned with the answer that tells us how many offspring are tall. And that is 75%. So this question didn't ask us about genotype, and it didn't ask us about the short phenotype. It only asked us about the tall phenotype. It's important to go through both because your homework is going to ask you, some of them will ask you about genotype, which is the genes or the alleles that you'll see. And some of them will ask you about phenotype, where they're asking you what characteristic it expresses as, tall or short. One of the homework questions is blue or green. So it's just asking you what the actual physical characteristics are that you will see. Again, homework is pages 13 to 14, and it's numbers 17 to 20. Make sure you get that done for tomorrow. And remember, test corrections are tomorrow. Make sure you have all your missed work made up.